When Mark and his 14-year-old daughter, Emily, arrived at a sun-soaked Florida resort, they thought it would be a vacation to remember. But within days, Mark noticed small, unsettling signs that someone was watching Emily too closely. What began as a family getaway quickly spiraled into a nightmare no parent could imagine. A fight to protect his daughter from a hidden danger lurking in plain sight. The family had been planning this Florida vacation for months. Flights were booked, hotel reservations confirmed, and the father had even mapped out a list of attractions he thought his daughter would enjoy. For the 14-year-old, it was the kind of trip that promised freedom and adventure, away from school and homework, where she could soak in the sun, explore new places, and simply be a kid. When they arrived at the resort, the sprawling property looked perfect. Palm trees swayed in the warm breeze, pools sparkled under the afternoon sun, and families laughed in every direction. The father felt a small sense of relief. This was supposed to be safe. This was supposed to be fun. At first, everything seemed ordinary. They checked into their room, unpacked, and headed straight to the beach. The daughter ran ahead, squealing with delight as she chased the waves. The father watched from a short distance, enjoying the sound of her laughter, feeling that fleeting sense of parental pride and contentment that vacations often bring. But beneath the surface of ordinary enjoyment, something began to unsettle him. It started subtly. A man who appeared repeatedly near the pool, always at a distance but always watching. At first he could write it off as coincidence. Florida resorts were busy, and strangers often crossed paths. Yet something about the way he lingered, his gaze following his daughter, made the father's stomach tighten. The daughter didn't seem aware of the attention. She built sandcastles and collected seashells, chatting occasionally with other kids, her excitement untainted. But the father noticed other small changes. She was hesitant to use the hotel elevators alone, checking her phone more than usual, and occasionally glancing over her shoulder when returning from the pool or convenience store. He tried to ask her casual questions, but she brushed them off with half smiles or vague answers. The more he observed, the more his unease grew. Each day, the same patterns repeated. The same strangers seemed to appear, always nearby, and little signs of nervousness flickered across his daughter's behavior. It was impossible to ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. He began documenting what he saw, jotting down the times, locations, and descriptions of anyone who seemed to linger around them. Every casual glance from strangers now felt like a warning. Even the hotel staff, once friendly and welcoming, now seemed to have a layer of scrutiny he hadn't noticed before. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself it was a father's natural protectiveness, yet the gnawing sense of danger persisted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, the father stayed on the balcony while his daughter played in the pool below. From that vantage point, he could see the comings and goings of the resort clearly. That's when he saw it, a small exchange that didn't fit the casual flow of vacation life. A stranger approached her at the poolside, and though the interaction was brief, it left the father with a chill. He realized in that moment that this trip, meant to be filled with carefree laughter, might already be crossing into something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The worry that had quietly crept in over the first days now turned sharp and insistent. Something about this vacation had changed, and the father felt a growing determination to protect his daughter, even if it meant uncovering truths he wasn't ready to face. Late one night, when the resort had quieted and most guests had retreated to their rooms, the father sat in the dim glow of his laptop, scrolling through his daughter's phone with a mix of anxiety and urgency. At first, he had hesitated, hoping that whatever unease he felt was just a parent's overprotectiveness, but the unease had grown too strong to ignore. His heart pounded when he noticed messages from numbers he didn't recognize, messages that seemed oddly coded, almost like secret instructions rather than casual conversation. They weren't addressed to him or his wife, and they contained phrases that made his stomach twist. The tone was not friendly, and the content hinted at arrangements, meetings, and details that made him realize this was not a harmless exchange. He tried to process what he was seeing. The idea that someone might be targeting his daughter seemed impossible, yet the evidence was in front of him. The phone displayed times and places, sometimes just room numbers or vague mentions of areas within the resort. The father's hands shook as he began documenting everything, taking screenshots and noting dates, times, and any identifying details. He traced numbers through reverse lookup services and social media accounts, finding fragments of profiles that made him more certain of the danger. A sense of dread settled deep in his chest. He realized this was not a random act. There was intention, a plan, and he was watching the very early stages of something sinister. Every instinct screamed at him to act, but he knew he needed to be careful. If whoever was involved realized he was aware, it could escalate the danger. He spent hours quietly observing, noting who approached their room or lingered near the areas his daughter frequented. Patterns emerged. Certain staff members seemed to appear at odd intervals, and a few guests kept crossing paths with them in ways that didn't feel coincidental. The father began to notice the subtle signals of grooming. Small gestures, friendly comments, and seemingly innocent attention that, when combined with the messages, painted a chilling picture. The father also noticed changes in his daughter. She had become quieter, more withdrawn, occasionally clutching her phone tightly or glancing around as if expecting someone. He kept his own anxiety in check, not wanting to frighten her, but he could see the tension building. Nights became the hardest when the resort was quiet and the shadows seemed to move differently. He reviewed surveillance footage wherever he could, asking the front desk about certain cameras under the guise of normal curiosity, trying to confirm his suspicions without revealing them. Every small piece of evidence added weight to his growing realization. His daughter had been targeted and time was critical. By early morning, exhaustion and fear weighed heavily on him, but he could not stop. He knew that understanding the full scope of the threat was the first step in keeping his daughter safe. The quiet rooms of the resort, the cheerful laughter of vacationing families, and the bright Florida sun outside felt like a fragile mask over a world that had suddenly turned dangerous. Each discovery, each message, each suspicious glance brought a sharper focus to the situation. The father felt both horror and determination, realizing that the joyful vacation they had planned had become a delicate and urgent mission to protect his child from forces he never imagined could reach into their lives so directly. The decision to call the authorities was one of the hardest moments the father had ever faced. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the weight of fear pressing down on him, knowing that reporting the situation could either protect his daughter or, if mishandled, put her in greater danger. He carefully recounted everything he had seen over the past few days. The messages on the phone, the strangers who lingered in suspicious ways, the subtle shifts in his daughter's behavior, and the strange exchanges that had made his gut tighten. Every word felt critical, and he spoke slowly, deliberately, hoping that the police would grasp the urgency of what he was describing. The authorities listened intently, their voices calm but serious, asking detailed questions about the hotel layout, the people he had noticed, and the specific times and dates of suspicious activity. The father provided every observation, no matter how small it seemed. He realized in that moment how quickly a collection of seemingly minor details could form the outline of a much larger danger. The call lasted longer than he expected, each question from the dispatcher making him feel both relief and dread. Relief that someone else now knew what he had feared alone, and dread over the unknown. What would happen next, and how quickly could they intervene? Within hours, officers arrived at the resort, their presence deliberate but discreet, blending in with the environment to avoid alarming the daughter or tipping off anyone who might be involved. They moved with purpose, questioning staff, reviewing surveillance footage, and quietly monitoring guest interactions. The father watched from a distance, torn between a sense of reassurance and a gnawing anxiety. Every shadow, every passerby now seemed like it could hold danger, and he felt a hyper-awareness that made it hard to relax even for a moment. The authorities traced the messages and accounts, finding links that pointed to a network operating beyond the resort. Each new piece of information deepened the suspense, revealing a hidden layer of activity beneath the sunny, carefree surface of the vacation property. The father could not help but think about how close they had come to disaster and how easily signs could have been overlooked. The thrill of the vacation had dissolved into a tense vigilance, every interaction now filtered through a lens of caution and suspicion. The nights were the hardest. The father stayed alert, ensuring his daughter remained close, monitoring the hallways, and sometimes reviewing the room's security camera feeds on his own. Sleep came in short bursts, each noise in the corridor causing a spike of fear. He watched the investigators work with meticulous care, piecing together evidence that confirmed his worst suspicions. The threat was real, immediate, and dangerous. Yet, alongside the fear, there was a growing sense of hope. By acting quickly, by noticing the small signs and trusting his instincts, he had drawn the authorities' attention to a situation that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. As the hours passed, the father understood something vital. Vigilance, preparation, and courage could change the outcome in moments of danger. The investigation was just beginning, but the first steps toward protection had been taken. The police presence, the careful gathering of evidence, and the father's unwavering attention created a fragile but critical shield around his daughter. It was a delicate balance of fear and relief, a tense waiting game that would determine the next chapter of their lives. One where every decision, every observation, and every second counted more than ever before. As the investigation deepened, the father began to see just how extensive the danger truly was. What had started as a series of small, worrying signs had blossomed into a revelation that shook the entire resort. Detectives uncovered a hidden network operating quietly within the hotel, a system designed to target vulnerable teens. The careful coordination, coded messages, and seemingly ordinary interactions were all part of a methodical plan. The father realized that what he had observed, the lingering strangers, the odd exchanges, the subtle pressure on his daughter, was part of a much larger, organized effort that stretched far beyond the sunny beaches and cheerful hotel lobby. The investigation revealed patterns that were hard to believe. Multiple victims had been lured into dangerous situations, often under the guise of casual encounters or friendly attention from staff members or other guests. Financial records showed transactions that hinted at payments exchanged for meetings, and digital communications painted a chilling picture of predators operating with precision. The father felt a mix of horror and validation. The intuition that had gnawed at him during the first days of the vacation had been correct, and the reality of the threat was more extensive than he could have imagined. One of the most shocking discoveries came when authorities traced the movements of certain staff members. People who were trusted, friendly, and seemingly ordinary were implicated in facilitating encounters or allowing access to guests in ways that were anything but innocent. It was a disturbing reminder of how predators can hide in plain sight, blending seamlessly into environments that appear safe. The father remembered each smile, each casual interaction, and felt a cold weight of disbelief. The very people meant to provide security and hospitality had, in some cases, contributed to the danger. As detectives pieced together digital trails, hotel logs, and witness statements, they began to map out the network in detail. The father watched, often from a distance, as investigators connected the dots, uncovering communications, room arrangements, and travel patterns that linked the resort to a broader web of criminal activity. It was intricate and calculated, showing a level of planning that was terrifying in its sophistication. The father's role, initially driven by instinct, had become crucial. Every observation he had made, every detail he had recorded, now served as key evidence in unraveling the network. The realization of how close his daughter had come to being trapped in this system was overwhelming. The father replayed each day in his mind. The fleeting glances, the unexplained hesitations, the small moments that had seemed insignificant at first. Each detail now fit into a pattern he could not ignore. Yet, amid the horror, there was a sense of relief and determination. Law enforcement's swift and careful action meant that the network could be disrupted, and more victims could be protected. The father understood the fragility of safety and the power of vigilance. What had begun as a family vacation had transformed into a fight against a hidden, dangerous world, one where awareness, courage, and persistence could mean the difference between life and danger. Through it all, the father's attention to the small signs, combined with the careful work of investigators, began to dismantle the network piece by piece. The hidden web that had threatened his daughter and others was being exposed, revealing the reality of the danger that lurked behind the smiling faces of the resort. The scope of the operation was staggering, but the father's dedication, his unwillingness to ignore instinct, had played a decisive role in turning what could have been tragedy into a story of survival and exposure. shining a light on a dark, hidden world that few had ever imagined. The moment his daughter was brought safely out of danger, the father felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion that he could hardly put into words. Months of fear, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance had culminated in this one fragile moment. She was unharmed physically, but the emotional weight of the experience lingered in the way she held herself, in the quiet pauses before answering questions, and in the careful way she now interacted with strangers. The father stayed close, offering comfort and reassurance, knowing that the process of recovery would take far longer than the ordeal itself. The authorities continued to work, following leads that had been uncovered through his observations and the hotel's records. The network that had targeted his daughter was dismantled piece by piece, but the evidence revealed the disturbing reality that many others had suffered in similar ways. The father felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and a determined responsibility to ensure that his daughter's experience could help prevent future tragedies. He kept meticulous notes, recording every step of the investigation, every lesson learned, and every detail that might serve as guidance for other parents or guardians. In the days that followed, the father and daughter began the slow process of reclaiming normalcy. They walked along the beach again, though more cautiously, taking in the sunlight while speaking little, letting the sound of the waves fill the space where fear had once resided. He noticed small signs of resilience, a hesitant smile here, a laugh there, moments when the past seemed to fade, if only briefly. Each small step forward was a victory, a reminder that survival was not just about escaping danger, but about finding the strength to move past it. The story of their experience quickly spread beyond the family. News outlets covered the case, highlighting the importance of parental vigilance, digital awareness, and understanding the subtle signs of predatory behavior. The resort faced intense scrutiny, prompting changes in staff training, stricter background checks, and improved security measures. While no protocol could erase the trauma his daughter had endured, the father felt a measure of hope knowing that their ordeal had sparked action, that lessons learned from their story could protect countless others. Even as life began to regain a sense of rhythm, the father remained acutely aware of the fragility of safety. Every message notification, every unfamiliar voice on the phone, every unknown face in a crowd reminded him that vigilance was ongoing. Yet alongside that awareness was pride in his daughter's resilience and gratitude for the authorities who had acted decisively. He understood that courage came in many forms, trusting instincts, acting quickly, and maintaining hope in the face of uncertainty. In time, their story became more than an account of danger. It became a lesson in survival and awareness. The father and daughter learned to navigate a world that could be threatening in ways that were not always visible. Their bond, strengthened by the ordeal, carried a new depth of trust and understanding. The experience left scars, yes, but it also left an enduring sense of empowerment. The father knew that vigilance in action had saved a life, and the daughter, though forever changed, had emerged from the shadows of danger with her spirit intact. Their story served as a reminder that even in the darkest situations, determination, courage, and careful attention could transform fear into protection and vulnerability into survival.